Hello everybody, this is Kavya Pai T from the Department of Biology, Gopal Swami PU College. Welcome to the first session of biology where we'll be starting with the first chapter, that is living world. In this chapter, we will be discussing about simple things or simple aspects regarding how do you call an organism as living or not. Earth is filled with different types of organisms, different varieties of organisms. Some do fly, some do creep, some do walk. There are herbivorous, there are carnivorous and omnivorous organisms. In together, Earth is a very diverse region where you can see biodiversity, large variety of living organisms. The name or the title of the chapter says living world. So first we should know, when do we call an organism living? So to say that a particular organism is living or a non-living, there should be certain criteria in that particular organisms or particular characters present in those organisms, based on which one we can consider them whether they are living or non-living. So we'll just study about the different criteria or characters regarding that one. First character will be growth. To define growth, what is growth? Growth is increase in mass or number. So growth in any organism is not avoidable. That means it cannot be avoided. So it is a permanent or it is a temporary form which is present in the, or a process which is present in the living organism. The growth might be internal as well as external. You can see around yourselves, human beings, plants, animals, anything, they keep on growing. Certain organisms grow only until that is a particular age. I am talking here about measurable growth, that is height. If you see in human beings, plants, there are not like that. They can grow throughout their life. That doesn't mean that your growth is stopped. There are certain growth which is taking within your body, like growth of cells, multiplication of cells. All these are examples for growth. That means growth can be defined as increase in mass or number. So it helps in development of an organism. But there are different types of non-living things which also do grow. For example, if you see mountain, there are each year or at certain duration, if you see the mountain, due to addition of some of the particle or particulate matters, you can see a small outgrowth even in the non-living thing. There is a slight increase in the mountain size. That is what can be considered as increase in mass or number. That means here non-living thing also increase their mass. They cannot increase their number, but the mass can be increased. So that is why growth cannot be considered as a criteria to identify whether the organism is living or not. That means both living things as well as non-living things, both do undergo or both do have growth. So we cannot consider growth as a criteria to identify whether the organism is living or not. This is not a criteria. Next criteria is reproduction. What is reproduction? Reproduction, to define this reproduction, it is the production of progeny. It is production of progeny of or same as that of the parents. That means what is a progeny? Progeny means it is a young one. If you take any example, for example, a human being can give rise or can give birth to a human baby itself, whereas a dog can give birth to puppies, whereas cat can give birth to kittens. If you see any of the young ones here, they look exactly similar to that of their parents. That means production of young one which appears similar to that of their parents, that is what you call reproduction. Re means once again producing the same type of organism which share the parental characters. So here reproduction whether can be considered as a criteria or not, that we'll see now. Now when it comes to reproduction, there are two different types of reproduction, that is sexual and asexual. Sexual reproduction involves fusion of gametes here. There are male and female gametes which fertilize together to produce a zygote or a young one in case of sexual reproduction. Most of the higher organisms undergo sexual reproduction. Whereas asexual reproduction, in case of asexual reproduction, there are no gametes. It is enough if it involves only a single parent. For example, if you see, spores are the means of asexual reproduction in case of fungi. In case of some species of fungi, spores are released. Wherever the spores fall or wherever they are placed in a particular environment, they develop into new fungi. So spores are the means of asexual reproduction in case of different forms of fungi. Apart from this one, if you see regeneration, this is a type of asexual reproduction which can be seen in planaria. Planaria involves regeneration type of asexual reproduction. Next one, when it comes to one more type, if you see some of the fungi, different species, filamentous algae, protonema of mosses, all these undergo fragmentation. So fragmentation is a type of asexual reproduction which can be seen in different species of fungi, filamentous algae and protonema of mosses, where a small part of a particular mother body will be separated. The small fragment separated develops into a new individual. So these are the different types or different forms of asexual reproduction where it involves only a single parent and no gametes will be formed. So these two are the types of reproduction. Now coming to the question whether it can be considered as a criteria or not. It cannot be considered as a criteria. Why? Because there are certain living organisms which do not undergo reproduction. For example, mule, worker honeybees, and sterile individuals. So in together these three are the examples for organisms which are living but do not undergo any reproduction. Now if you see mule, mule is the combination of a donkey and a horse. So this donkey and horse combination offspring mule, it is not produced naturally but only under lab condition. The reason why mule was produced because in order to provide or produce a progeny which have the ability or characters of both the parents, that is both horse as well as donkey. But here the problem was mule produced was very good or very hard working as well as the capacity of both donkey and horse was found. Unfortunately, this mule is a sterile organism which cannot produce any offspring of its own. So that is one of the example. Worker honeybees. So in honeybees there are three different categories. Female fertile one will be the queen and she is the only fertile in the colony. Next will be the drones. Drones are the male fertile organisms and last one will be the worker honeybees. Worker honeybees are the one who does the work all together in the colony, that is taking care, like soldiers they do, they are pollinators, they get the pollen grains, they prepare the honey, nursing bees take care of the young ones, clean the colony, all this are done by worker honeybees. Even though they do so much of work, but they do not have the ability to produce their young ones. That means these are all the worker honeybees will be female, but these are all sterile worker bees. So that also do not have the ability to produce young ones, along with which sterile human beings. So these sterile individuals do not have the ability to produce a young one. So that in that case reproduction also cannot be considered as a criteria to identify whether the organism is living or not. So that's about two different criteria. Next is the third criteria, that will be metabolism. So metabolism means it is the sum total of chemical reactions taking place in our body. So all the chemical reactions which takes place in our body. So now there is a question, does our body undergo this chemical reaction? Yes, of course. What is the reason of undergoing this chemical reaction? To produce energy. Energy is the basic component what is obtained from chemical reactions, and the process is called metabolism. The reaction is called metabolic activity. Individual cells present in our body undergo this metabolism to produce energy so that the body will be having the ability to do work. So in together, sum total of all the chemical reaction is termed metabolism. Individual action takes place in each and every cell. Now if you consider whether this is a criteria or not, yes, of course this can be considered as a criteria for living organism. That means none of the non-living things undergo, or they may undergo chemical reactions or on their surface, but there is no question of producing energy out of that one. That is why if you see here, metabolism can be considered as a criteria. Here when the metabolic reaction can also be undergone in lab condition, and that is called in vitro. In vitro means whatever reactions which takes place within the body, the same reactions can be considered or can be done outside the body. So in lab condition, and that particular type of reactions are termed in vitro. Now when it comes to in vitro, even though the reactions are taking place outside the body, but the actions are living actions or living reactions. That is why you can consider metabolism as a criteria to define the living organism. Next, fourth criteria will be cellular organization. When it comes to cellular organization, in case of organism, the basic unit will be cell, group of cells form tissue, group of tissues form organ, group of organs form organ system, and group of organ systems, that is all together helps in formation of a organism. So in together in any of the organisms, if it is unicellular, then the level is only till cellular level. As the organisms belong to higher groups, cells, formation of tissues, tissues group, organ and organ group, organ system can be identified in any of the organism. Higher level organism will have all the 4 components where you can see particularly organ system carrying different function, which is completely absent in non-living things. That is why cellular organization can also be considered as one of the criteria to define a living organism. And the last criteria will be consciousness. So, to define consciousness, it is ability to respond to stimuli. So, consciousness means ability to respond to a stimuli. It might be external stimuli or it might be internal stimuli. So, ability of an individual body to respond to that particular stimuli is termed consciousness. When it comes, for example, if you see in case of summer, your body will start to sweat. The reason why it sweats is to cool down your body, and when it comes to winter, your body starts shivering. It is to generate the heat so that your body is maintained in a normal condition. So, it is a type of stimuli. If you see that environment acts as a stimuli here, and the response of the body to that stimuli, that is because of consciousness. Whereas in case of human beings, we have a different form of consciousness which we call self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is the type of consciousness which is present in human beings. When it comes to the consideration of this as a criteria, yes, consciousness can be considered as a criteria and can be used to define a living organism. But here there is a drawback also. That means if you see a patient who is in coma, will not have any response or will not show the response to any of the stimuli. If a coma patient or a paralyzed person also, if any stimuli, external stimuli is applied on his body or her body, the response will be 0. That means coma patients or paralyzed patient can be considered as an exception. So, we have discussed so far about 5 different types of criteria, that was growth, reproduction, metabolism, cellular organization and consciousness. Out of the 5, we did consider that growth and reproduction cannot be considered as a criteria because we can find increase in mass even in non-living things, plus we can find also some of the sterile individuals who do not reproduce in case of reproduction criteria. Whereas when it comes to metabolism, cellular organization and consciousness, we did find that these are particular criteria which can be applied in an organism to consider whether they are living or not. So, based on the 5 different criteria, now we can define living organisms as self-replicating, evolving, self-regulating, interactive system, which have the ability to respond to a stimuli. So, this is the definition for a living organism. So, living organism means these are self-replicating, evolving, self-regulating or self-regulation, interactive system which have the ability to respond to a stimuli. That is how you define a living organism. So, that is about different types of criteria involved in this particular concept regarding definition of living organisms. To summarize, we have studied today about the living organisms, their criteria like growth, reproduction, metabolism, cellular organization and consciousness, and we have come across whether to consider these criteria to define living organisms, if not, why not, and some of the exceptions regarding the criteria. After which we have got a proper definition for living organisms. Thank you.